It's probably the most taboo subject in Christianity, and yet since the Fuel Project began, it's easily been one of the most prevalent questions dropping into my email inbox. What does the Bible say about masturbation? It seems that many church leaders don't particularly want to talk about this subject, and yet there are a lot of people out there who do want to hear something about this subject. There seems to be a void of information there that not many are willing to step into. And it's got to be said that the information that does exist is often quite contradictory. Some people are on one side saying one thing about it, others on another side. And so there's just a lot of confusion and guilt, it seems, about this topic. I think it's probably due to embarrassment that this issue isn't being more widely addressed within the church. And I have to say that I don't regard myself as being any better than others in this respect either. In the 7 years since this ministry began, I can't ever remember publicly talking about masturbation, and embarrassment's probably been the problem for me too. However, I have had a narrative building in my mind for some time about this, and due to the number of questions and the confusion, I thought, you know what, let's just do it, let's just get it out of the way, let's just get into it. And indeed, I promised everyone that emailed that I would eventually do something on this, so this is a fulfillment of that promise. Before starting, however, I did want to get some counsel to make sure that I wasn't making a mistake, so I went to the ministry's patrons, those who financially support the Fuel Project through Patreon, and I posted a note asking for their advice. Should I go ahead with this topic? Am I breaking any codes of propriety? But overwhelmingly, they all responded saying that masturbation, as well as the closely tied issue of pornography, was indeed something that needed to be discussed within the church. And so here it is. This is the new series. It's called The M Word. There are three things I want to say about this series before we get started on it. Firstly, I want to explain the format of this series. It's going to be divided into two main sections. And this is because there are indeed two broad approaches to the issue of masturbation. There are those who say that masturbation for Christians is a less than ideal but acceptable means of managing the sexual impulse until marriage. And then there are those who say that Christians outside of marriage should practice complete abstinence from all sexual release. In each section of the series then, I'm going to give each side the fairest hearing possible. The first half is called the case for concession, and then the second half is called the argument for abstinence. And it's only at the very end of the series, that we're going to weigh up both sides of the debate to see which one is actually the strongest. I'm making this clear at the beginning because it's not uncommon to receive emails of complaint from people who haven't read or watched a piece of content all the way to the end. So I want to emphasize that when you watch the first half, I'm not yet personally backing concession, and if you don't back it either, then don't yet think that we're at odds with each other. Your side of the story is on the way. It will be heard, I promise. But in the same fashion, when you watch the second half, don't yet think that I'm personally backing abstinence either. You see, in both halves, I'm merely trying to give each side the fairest hearing possible, so at the end of the series, we'll have taken all of the information into consideration to make our final judgment. Now, the second thing I want to say is that the majority of emails I've received about this subject have come from men, mostly young men. Therefore, I couldn't help but have them in mind when I was making this series. Of course, being a male myself, that also redoubled the likelihood that this series would be made with a distinctly male point of view. Therefore, I can't promise that this series will do a great job of understanding the female viewpoint, and my apologies if it doesn't. However, I do hope that there's enough that's common between the sexes for this series to be able to speak to both men and women, on some level at least, at the same time. And then the third and final thing I want to say is that the book that this series will follow is already released. It's available on Amazon. So if you don't want to wait for these videos, you can head over there right now, you can pick up a copy, and you can be ahead of the curve. I think that's all the housekeeping done. I think I've said everything I needed to. So with all that being said, let's begin.